engineering side of Mattia Binotto is good. I think he's a very good engineer and everything. Thing is, as I said at the time, he's not a manager. He's not probably capable to manage people. It was expected, but you never realize until you do it. I'm sure you are aware about the GTE Pro finishing with this year. So next year it won't be GTE Pro and GTE AM. It will be just GTE class. So far they've got 6 car. It's not a real championship with 6 car. You know what I mean. I hope we will have engines, real engines, with all the noise and all the pollution stuff. Not because I'm against the environment, but because that's racing.
Whether you like it or not, Davide, we have officially adopted you as our race engineer for the show.
If you get a point, you can do better. So I'm still working on improve myself, improve the company.
Hello and welcome to the Stripping the Dipping podcast. You're joined by your usual co-host, AMG Denz, aka the MDM, the modern day Morgan Freeman. And what can I say? It's been quite a while since I've done one of these, like pre-recorded podcasts. So I'm gonna try and get my way back into it. But in light of that and in vain of that, we've got a really awesome guest. He was very popular in one of the earlier episodes we did earlier on in the year. So it's always amazing to have an individual like him with his knowledge, his intel, his credentials back on this podcast always. He's a race engineer. He's a sim racing engineer. He's also the director and extraordinaire of A Cup of Racing Limited. Without any further ado, guys, I'd like you to give a warm welcome to a returning guest on our show. That would be Davide de Russis. Davide, how have you been, my friend?
All good, all good. It's nice to be back here. Thank you.
Oh, well, we're more than happy to have you, man. And like we even said in the original episode we did with you, there's so much that we took away from that. A lot of our kind of following and fan base, they're into sim racing, and we always get from like the driver's perspective. But then when it comes to actually the kind of perspective of like the race engineer in a sim racing context, it's really cool. And then on top of that, throughout the kind of year as well, we've been trying to touch different motorsport disciplines, such as the GTE, the GT3, the Le Mans and the World Endurance series as well. So you were amazing for that. And also we had like a spicy kind of conversation about Ferrari, which I guess we're gonna make a kind of like a return to or circle to later on. But before we do that, Davide, just like on a general note, how's everything been? Could you give us a brief insight into what you've been getting up to in the world of motorsport since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's December, so season is finished, but it's been a busy month after, I think it was July or August last time we spoke. So we basically won the championship, the WEC championship for the GTE IM class. So very happy about that. It was the actually end of a perfect season, almost perfect season from us. So can't be more happy than that for sure. And in terms of European Le Mans Series, I had other 3 rounds, I think, at the time and 1 testing. So all went well, apart from the last round when we got hit like 10 minutes before the end, and was very painful for us because for a 4-hour race, I mean, it's not 24-hour, but when you just finish your race 10 minutes before the end, is always painful, it's endurance racing at the end. So you put a lot of effort, drivers put a lot of effort, mechanics put a lot of effort, and then at the end you just finish with nothing because of a crash. So it was not our fault, but it is what it is, and that's about motorsport, I would say. For the rest, I've been involved again with sim racing. We started Le Mans Virtual Series with Williams Esports. We're doing quite good so far. Still in the fight for the championship, difficult for us to win. We did a very good podium on the wet in Monza a couple of months ago. And now we just started, basically tomorrow, the preparation for Le Mans 24 virtual. That will be mid-January. So it's still busy, a bit less, but a lot going on, as always.
Oh, that sounds amazing, Davide. And like you mentioned there too, there's like a plethora of so much motorsport and racing happening at the same time as well. And also, as you mentioned there too, you have the highs of obviously winning a championship, which we'll discuss later on in the show. But also, like you mentioned too, that at times through something that can be so unexpected, your fortune can also change as well. And sometimes even when you execute excellent strategy, something can still happen on track, and that all unfolds too. So I can definitely relate to that. And kind of in a segue to the first big topic, then, Davide, that almost kind of, if you ask somebody to describe Ferrari season in a way, I think a lot of people might draw similar kind of comparisons because in what was kind of a shocking revelation last week, Matteo Bonotto, the team principal of Ferrari, steps away. When we talked earlier in the year, we talked about Ferrari being the team that have the right tools in terms of the car, which performed excellently during the preseason test and in the first half of the season, and obviously two drivers as well, which are very capable, although they make mistakes. But at times, maybe their approach in terms of management, personnel, strategy, not being as sharp as it could be. And then towards the second half of the season, after the summer break, that pressure seemed to surmount Ferrari even more, in the fact that they weren't able to give Red Bull that challenge right to the end of the season and sustain that pressure on them. People have criticized them as well for not being as aggressive as aggressive as they could be with pushing the development of their car in light of the cost cap compared to other rivals, which has been quite a big story too. So kind of to throw the ball into your court, Davide, like what was your initial reaction, to the kind of speculation and rumors that we saw, like leading up to Matteo putting in his resignation? And the kind of bigger question from your perspective, did Ferrari underdeliver considering that they came into the season with the tools to surmount a championship fight? Or is it unfair considering they had so many drawbacks in previous years? And this was the first year where actually they seemed to go back to their winning ways. They still finished above Mercedes, which have been the most dominant team, in the recent kind of like motorsport world.
Yeah. I mean, let's say that I think the engineering side of Mattia Binotto is good. I think he's a very good engineer and everything. Thing is, as I said at the time, he's not a manager. He's not probably capable to manage people. So if you think in the past, team principal in Ferrari left for much, much less than what he done so far. Let's say, for example, Arriva Bene. Arriva Bene finished after 2 seasons when he almost won the championship 2 times with Vettel, and he got fired. In the last 4 years, 5 years, Binotto did much worse than that, and he was still there. So don't get me wrong, but I think it was almost time for him to resign or to get fired, because I'm not sure he's wanted to be really on a resignation. It was much more like he got fired, but they wanted to tell him to people, because if you remember at the beginning, a month ago, it was speculation about Ferrari let him leave. Then was another speculation about he resigning. At the end of the story, he resigns, but I think it wasn't really a resignation. It was a way to say, okay, you go. We say that you resign, so everybody save the face, and it's fine like that. But I don't think Ferrari solved the problem, just fire him or let him leave, because there, as I said already, there are basically issues there. That was about the development of the car, it was about strategy, it was about general management. The main issue of all these was that Binotto had too much power, too much roles all in one person, and this in the modern Formula One doesn't work. It didn't work in the 90s. Ferrari had 4 people managing the 4 aspects of the team, if you remember. How this year, that is much more complicated as a car, as a strategy, a lot of more competition in compared with the 90s, could work an idea about one person doing everything, So I think the problem will be still there if they don't find a way to structure better the team. And yeah, about underperforming, I completely agree. I mean, they should win the championship this year, because at the beginning of the year, I think they had the best car, they had the best drivers, or one of the best drivers at least. They just lose a championship that was easy to win. I mean, not easy, but for sure with high probability to win.
Yeah, I think that was a fair and almost like honest review there too, Davide, in relation to how they performed, also insight as well as, Matteo as like an individual. And I'm sure to work with him would be amazing. But then if you're talking about running like a multi-billion conglomerate like Ferrari, I would say almost it's not even a company, it's a religion to a lot of people.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
it's a huge kind of like shoes to step in. And we'll come back to some of those other points you mentioned as well, there, Davide, because I think you raised some really great points. But on the topic of like replacements for him, a lot of people have been throwing the hat in the ring for one Frederick Vasseur, which is the team principal currently at Alfa Romeo, which also has quite a nice kind of relationship with Ferrari in terms of the technical side of things. Also, people have been quite, keen to kind of link Frederick Vasseur because of his relationship with Charles Leclerc. We know that obviously Ferrari hold Charles as like the golden egg because they've given him like one of the longest long-term contracts like I think a Ferrari driver's ever had because of the promise and because of the potential he showed in his earlier career. And then linking it back to Frederick, that was Charles Leclerc's manager in F2. He also was Charles's like manager and team boss during go-karting days as well. So considering that at times what would have helped Ferrari is to have a clear lead number one driver and number two driver, a bit like what Red Bull have. Could you see an individual like Frederick Vasseur coming in? And as you mentioned too, I get you kind of partially answered this, but look into it a bit more deeper. Would a more experienced, more kind of like calculated, colder manager like him, not kind of like replicate some of the disappointments that maybe's happened under Bonotto's watch?
Yeah, it's a trick question, this one, because I think in terms of the relationship with Leclerc, Vasseur did a great job in Sauber, in Formula 2 and everything. So I think also the name of Vasseur comes out because Leclerc would be keen to have it. And for sure now he is the kind of reference point with Binotto leaving, because he's the one that should deliver much more than what he delivered this year as well. But he's also have more experience this year than what he had 1 year ago, and is continually improving all the time. So I think Vasseur could be a very good choice in terms of having a relation with Leclerc and structure the team to let Leclerc have the performance he needs to deliver and the confidence as well. From the other side, he's not very experienced in Formula One, so it could be a difficult, let's say, way to start, because I think he is in Formula One since 2017 only. So going in a top team like Ferrari, when everybody have more than a lot of expectations on him and on the team as well, and will be the main team manager, will be very difficult for him. So with the situation that's going on in Ferrari at the moment, with not clear roles assigned, it won't be a very easy job for him to manage stuff. But at this point, I don't see really any other candidates that could be better than him, because affirmed like team manager or team principal like Christian Horner would be great, but they won't go at all. It's too risky, and they are in a very good position with, I think, much more money to earn than Ferrari can offer at the moment. So if you find someone within the team, you may risk to have another Binotto situation. So you find a way from the team. And if you find a way from the team, Vasseur is the only one actually available and that know Leclerc well and could deliver something. So it's not easy. I want to be in his situation, because it's difficult to be the team principal of Ferrari more than any other team, especially now, and without his experience, that will be a very difficult job at the beginning. That doesn't mean that he can't be a good team principal. We don't know, actually.
Yep, I agree with that too. And again, just kind of in relation to that, one of the things I think that was really good about going back to Bonotto was just his nature. And he almost had that thing of not blaming anybody, not pointing the fingers. So to flip it on its head almost, to ask you this honest question as well, Davide, do you think that there's still too much politics at Ferrari? Because as you alluded to earlier as well in one of the great responses that you gave us, like there's always seemed to be like a revolving door culture at Ferrari. And you mentioned it under the Oliver Bene era as well when Seb was there. Stefano Domenicali also seemed like he was quite stressed out and seems a lot more happier now that he's the FIA, CEO. Obviously in terms of Ferrari's like management structure and ownership structure. You've got really big figureheads like Louis Camilleri, Sergio Marchioni, which passed away untimely. Now you've got John Elkann as well, which he's a bit more younger than the typical Ferrari CEO, but still, I don't really see him smile too often, which tells me that he's a really serious guy. And even just other things as well. Like we talked about how much weight Leclerc actually has at Ferrari. I remembered the other day that like Leclerc's manager is actually John Todd's son, and John Todd was the team principal of Ferrari at one stage. So, yeah, there seems to be a lot of kind of like politics at Ferrari, and then it seems almost in a way that what they did to Bonotto or their lack of like protecting him or kind of like giving him the extra time, it undermined that period of stability that Bonotto was trying to build in that culture that resembles the kind of Schumacher area where we saw Michael, technical directors like Russ Braun, team principals like John Todd, designers like Rory Byrne. What's your kind of take on this, the culture of like, an Italian team like that? And also, do you think it works or not? Because in other sports, like in football, we see Chelsea make, really harsh decisions. And if a manager doesn't win the league, he doesn't win a trophy, they're gone. They don't get too much time.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with some politics. I think Ferrari is too much political now. That's the reason why Binotto had the power to have all those roles. I mean, let's be honest. It's too much for a single person to be in 4 different roles and decide basically everything in a Formula One team. It doesn't matter if it's Ferrari or if it's another one. It's like Red Bull. Red has Chris Horner, as Adrian Newey, as Helmut Marko. Everybody had a clear role, and you see by yourself the result of the last 10 years. They always be there. They always fight for something. Even if the driver is not delivering, they finish P3 in the championship. So that's a team that works. So I agree with some politics. If the politics is good enough to create the winning stability you need to win. So you mentioned about Schumacher era. Okay, yeah, they have stability, but if you remember, Schumacher went into Ferrari in 1996 and did a very kind of good race sometimes. The team was good, it was working everything fine, and then the car wasn't so good. So he had the reliability issue and they retired the car so much time. But then in 97, he fight for the championship. In 98, he fight for the championship. In 99, apart from the accident, he fought for the championship. And then in 2000, everybody remembers what happened next. So that's a stability you want to have for 4 years. If you see something, you can actually say, okay, that's the right way, that's the right direction. We are trying to win something because we are so close to win something that at a certain point it will be coming. And that's not happening with Binotto at all. I mean, we're missing a like kind of good season so far since 14 years. If you remove the Arrivabene periods from the equation. And Binotto didn't do anything better than him, because this year they could win the championship, but at the end of the story, they did a mistake exactly like Arrivabene did, and they didn't win anything. It's even worse if you think about it, because at the beginning of the season, Ferrari was much more faster than now, and was actually fighting with Red Bull easily, when Mercedes was nowhere. At the end of the season, Mercedes was fighting for P2 in the championship, in the Constructors' Championship. And Ferrari was far away from Red Bull. So that means not only that Ferrari didn't develop the car and the team properly and did mistake, but that Red Bull and Mercedes improved so much that actually put a risk the P2 in the championship. And that's something that the politics can't fix at all. You need people. You need the proper people in the proper position. You mentioned that the example of football. In football, you can have 11 players, for me, that are the best 11 players in the world, and still losing, because you don't need the best players, you need the best players for that positions. You need to create a team, then you are allowed to speak about stability and win something, I think. And that's not going to happen now in Ferrari at the moment. They need to structure better first with the proper people in the proper places. So if let's say that Vasseur is going to be team principal, he can't be the technical director. I would say a good technical director for Ferrari could be Simone Resta. It should be, for me, from my side, from my opinion, should be Simone Resta since 5 years ago, and they never give him the chance to be the technical director. So it's something that they need structure. Politics is good as soon as you ensure that the politics works with the team and deliver the performance. Otherwise, it's just creating stability and putting wrong people in wrong places, and this is not going to end up in any victories or good thing, I think.
That's true, and again, Davide, I think a really good and balanced kind of response there too, in how in a team that's successful, you need like the dynamics of both of those things to come into play. But more importantly than ever is the competency, you know, and somebody that knows what to do, you know, and also is not going to allow people to become stagnant. Or in also like what you mentioned there too, like a diversification of the responsibilities and not having so many roles assigned to one person. And the kind of final Ferrari question, because I'm conscious of making this Ferrari podcast, which to most AMG guys are gonna be like, what the hell is happening here then?
That's strange, yeah.
Exactly. But the kind of final question, just on a human level there, Davide, is do you feel sorry for Binotto? Because although a lot of people blame him, even actually for the engine controversy Ferrari actually had back in 2019, there's still some people that feel that he wasn't given enough time, and that in a way it's significant to have somebody like him at Ferrari, because like for most people and how like high and fast paced Formula One is these days, people just like try and pinch whoever they can from whatever team is around. Whereas with Binotto, there's like actually pictures on Google of him from when he was like a university graduate wearing the baggy kind of like Ferrari kind of like jackets when he was much younger, probably even younger than I am now, you know, and like he's kind of like an example of somebody that's come into a industry as like a young person and grown with one company and like, you know, progressed his career as he's got older and got more senior with this one company his entire life. So, you know, I mean, do you feel sorry for him, or do you think that, you know, he had an opportunity and at the end of the day as well, you know, like he's done good things for Ferrari. So whilst, you know, he's kind of going out kind of like not necessarily, you know, on the highest note or how he would dream to have gone, you know, like you'll still be remembered for the moments that he did do well with Ferrari and ultimately the foundations that they have now, because they still have, like on a Saturday, one of the fastest cars. It's just, you know, maybe they could have been more aggressive with the development. Maybe next year, maybe they've already been moving resources towards next year. You know, also, are they going to be looking at, you know, the technical team? And you mentioned there, Simone de Resta. He's like, I think the guy at, he's an engineer at Haas at the moment, but he's worked with Ferrari. So there's guys kind of within the Ferrari family that could be, you know, moved about in a way to help them push and take the next step towards either Red Bull or Mercedes.
Yeah, I mean, from the personal level, I think everybody can feel sorry for him because he spent 28 years in the same company, and he was there with Schumacher. He was I think, the vehicle engineer, something like that. So for sure, he did a lot of work for the same company, a lot of trust. It's correct to give him. You can't say, you know, it was so bad that they fire him or he resigned or whatever it is. But as a team principal, no. And that's just because, as I said, you need the best people in their positions, and he's not a team manager. He's an engineer. I think he's a very good engineer, and if you see all the technical director cars he did, they were great. 2017, 2018, 2019, there was very good car. He was the technical director. Same for now. He covered the technical director roles, and the car wasn't so bad. So you can't blame him as an engineer. You can't blame him as a person. I think you can blame him as a team principal, and that's it. So he deserves to be fired as a team principal. It doesn't deserve to be fired as a person that put all the engineering skills and capability for 28 years into the same company. So it's again a 50-50.
That's fair, Davide. And like I mentioned as well, I mean, it's an interesting one because like you see people on Twitter and all these social media apps, very opinionated. I think either side, but it's intriguing, to just see in like a team like that where Ferrari are the most iconic brand. They have the biggest legacy in Formula One. Like everybody, when at least even when I was a kid, like you always in school rather than paying attention to the maths teacher, I'm drawing red cars. That's probably why I didn't become a race engineer, to be fair. But it's interesting, to see how that plays out and from like the technical side, but then also even just from a personal level, how sometimes like somebody's strengths are great for one thing but not necessarily great for everything. So that's so true. And to kind of segue to a new topic then, Davide, because we've spent a nice time on that one. Let's talk about the virtual Le Mans series. So, like in the previous episode we talked a lot about, sim racing, how much it's evolved, how like many people are becoming like even more in tune with it because of all of the special esports events. There's now like an official F1 esports event. There's obviously as well this FIA Virtual Le Mans series, which has a lot of prominent drivers in it. Max Verstappen takes part in it from time to time. Roman Grosjean takes part in it. Raffaello Marcello, one of my favorite drivers, he's in there too. So this week that just went past was the Sebring 500 race. I think it was P3 for the Mercedes AMG esports team, and then P8 for the Williams esports team. How would you describe this particular weekend, Davide, in terms of how the race played out, and also with a track like Sebring too, just for our viewers at home as well, and some of them that don't know about Sebring, American circuit, very bumpy. It's quite popular though in like IMSA and other kind of like spec series too for multi-class racing, but there are lots of bumps and it's a very technical circuit, so it's not one that ever suited my driving style, to be fair, in the sim. But how does it like how did it go from your perspective, and also how does one go about like making the setup when it comes to the suspension geometry and aspects of this too?
Yeah, first of all, I need to tell you, we were three cars about Williams and Mercedes. That's not always clear, so I can understand. So the P3 car, the number 63, that's completely managed from Mercedes, so it wasn't one of my cars.
Okay.
I've got the 53 Williams Mercedes team that finished P, I don't remember because we got it at a certain point, so not very good, P8, I think. And then we got the Williams C-Sport that finished P5. Okay, so I was on both car P5 and P50 and P8, so car 5 and car 53 for Williams and Mercedes. So that's basically that. So in terms of what I think about the race, I think with the Williams car, the number 5 LMP2, was a great race because that's the crew is new. They work together since this year, so we needed to build from scratch everything. Some of them they didn't have much experience with the car, so from the beginning of the year of the season in Bahrain until now that we are almost at the end, it was a proportional growth race by race with a lot of issue in terms of disconnection hardware that didn't actually show up until now what they could do as a team. Finally in Sebring they have a kind of clean race in respect with the rest and they finish P5. So that's what we can do with that car, even if they are very young and unexpert with the car. So I'm very happy for them, very pleasant about the recovery from P9 after quali to P5 in the race. Good pace, good fuel saving, despite some small issue all around that we need to fix it. But they are improving because even considering the issues they've got, they started in Bahrain and they finished P11. Then they had a P9 in Monza with some issue with the hardware again. P7, I mean, potential P7 in Spa because they've got a froze screen and they finish last for that reason, but they were potential P7 and now P5 finally without any mistakes. So they always see a grow in their performance, always improving and very happy and pleasant about working with them. For car 53, that is actually the one we are fighting for the championship, almost, because now it's tricky for us. We've got a very bad lag at the beginning of the season. We've got a mass disconnection of 10 cars, and our car, we were both in that 10 cars, so we lost an amount of points. And even if we recover until P7 in the first race of the season, it could have been a podium. So the difference in points was big. Then we start to recover. It was a good race in Monza. We finished on the podium, P2. In Spa, we did what we could without full course yellow, any strategy options for a full green race. We managed to recover some position from a bad quali, and we finished top 5. We could have been on the podium, I think, in this race, because we were fighting for P4 when the other Mercedes car, the 63-1, hit us. They didn't get the penalty I think they deserved. We got a warning and we finished P10. Then we got Marcello in the car that isn't so much confident for some issue we are doing in preparation with him. He didn't have so much time to prepare, so we ended up with him to be fast but not consistent, and he spun. So we managed to finish in some way P8, but wasn't really a good race for us. I'm sorry because the performance was there. The preparation was good. The driver put every effort they could. So it's so much shame when something like this happens. But it's motorsport again. You can do nothing about it. So full focus on Le Mans with them because we need to recover points. We would like to win Le Mans because this year will be perfect for me. I won the real one, so I won the virtual as well. And now we've got also more junior engineers on board with me, so they can help a lot during in-race support and preparation. I'm not alone anymore with 2 cars and 6 drivers. So it's always good, you know. In terms of the track, Sebring, I don't like it. I have to be honest, because I mean, bumps are very spectacular and good because I mean it's a different circuit. So from the sporting side, it's perfect. But I'm telling you, you need to be as soft as possible in the track. But you can't, because if you are too soft, you are good on bumps, but you are very bad in everything else. So you need to deal with the bumps, and sometimes that's get tricky for the drivers. It's a track, a very technical track. You need to be almost perfect every corner to have a consistent pace. So I don't like overall, not because it's not the technicality of the track, because I love technical tracks, but because it's like even more difficult just because it's not a real track. It was an old airport. And I think they won't do anything about that because it's like the peculiarity of the circuit to have these bumps. If you remember at the beginning of the year in March when WEC was in Sebring for the first round of the championship, there was the hashtag respect the bumps there. So you need to deal with that, and you need to prepare a car that is fast enough, stiff enough to be with a good performance in Sebring, but not too much for the bumps, because otherwise you get no grip and you can have very bad moments on the car and ruin everything. So that's why I don't like it, because it's a good track, it's difficult, but it's a lot affected from the peculiarity of the circuit. There are other technical racetrack like Spa that I prefer much more, because there you need to have a good car, a good balance between aero performance, mechanical performance, and full speed, top speed. But at the same time, you don't have any, let's say, tarmac issue like bumps or high curves that actually give you problems. So you can focus on the performance of the driver of the car and do your best to win. That should be the only way to win, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's like it echoes a lot of the thoughts I always have as well, Davide. Like racing at circuits like that too, and I agree with you. Even with like Spa, it's such an awesome circuit. And even when I was watching like the full 24 hours of Spa this year, just to see how like the Aston Martin was strong at certain parts, but then Raffaello Marcello, Jules Gounon, and those GT3 guys, and like the real kind of GT3 racing. The AMG suit certain parts too, but then also like the characteristics of the car, you could see which one was using less kind of like downforce and had more speed through Eau Rouge and through the Camel Straight. Then you could see who's running more downforce in the second and third sector too, where it's more kind of reliant. And then that translates even a lot more into the sim too, because at a conventional circuit like that, which is purpose built, you can practically, like you said, just go and just like build the car and get a nice balance of both. But with like a old airport, as you described it, with Sebring. It's like you're trying to get the performance, but at the same time you have to have a compromise in there to make the car even drivable. Because for even, let's say, like a 6 hour race, it's a long time for a driver to be driving the car on the edge. And obviously the more consistent the driver can be, ultimately the faster their race time, and everything will be at the end as well. So that's really interesting, and a great insight from that perspective too. Another thing I kind of wanted to bring in as well, Davide, because you talked about like the workload of managing practically two Williams esports team, which is crazy. Like to even me,
Yeah.
that is like it's a lot to kind of take in, and a lot of data to process, a lot to keep an eye on. How
I mean,
has it been for kind of go on?
it was fun at the beginning because I actually had a meeting. I remember at the end of August, to assign the championship for the rest of the year, and one of the management guy told me like, you are assigned to Le Mans Virtual Series. Is one of the most important championship for us, so we need to do a good job. And I asked, okay, me and he said, and you. I was okay, right, perfect, no stress. As always. But yeah, at the end of the story, we managed in some way, and we're still improving all the time the procedure, and the driver seems happy. So results is actually not bad. We had a lot of bad luck so far, but the car was always good. Strategy was always good. The driver did a very good job every time. So can't really complain too much about that. It was an experience at the beginning, if you know what I mean.
No, for sure, for sure. And just in relation to that as well, Davide, like how has that kind of process been too, in terms of taking somebody else on and training them to kind of, look for certain things during the race, and kind of delegating that responsibility too, and kind of as a segue question to that as well, is your preparation for the virtual Le Mans any different? Because I guess maybe with the advantage that you guys have with sim racing is that there might be a server which the drivers and teams can have a look at, and I don't know if they like give you the conditions, or like in our factor as well, is the like dynamic kind of like weather. So obviously when you're in the night, the tire wear is not so high because obviously the temperatures are a lot cooler, but then throughout the day, perhaps there's rain, perhaps also there's a lot of heat as well. How does that also play into it, and how do you go for preparing for such a kind of like one legendary but also very important kind of like spec event like that too?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you too much details for obvious reasons, but I can say procedure are more or less the same. You prepare the real world one. The only thing you've got more, and it's make easy your job to do, is the time. Because you can, if you want, you can simulate a 24-hour race and decide about compounds, and decide about the car, and decide about the strategy. So you have much more data and the infinite time to play with the data you've got. So the preparation is much easier because you just need to go there, test, have the data, and understand the data, and you can test again and again and again and again. And that's good for driver confidence, and it's good for the car setup, and that's good for the strategy options. And the same to decide compound, test rain, compare with dry, or whatever temperature you've got in the track. So just give you more flexibility. So if you use well the time, you will be very prepared for the 24-hour in January, because we've got more than a month today to actually prepare for 24-hour race. So it's just a matter to use properly the time and apply the procedure you already use, and you know that works in real world, with much more tools, time, and possibilities than doing a week before the 24-hour race in the real world. It's just about that.
That's interesting, and it's nice to see almost the symmetry, between the real life and also even in the simulator. And the approach is fundamentally the same, although, like you mentioned, there's more kind of time, there's also more data, and at least for the drivers taking part as well, there's almost like a strategy and different things they can mess around with as well, in terms of like the tire compound, how that also will fluctuate, and how a tire will behave, whether or not you could like only do a single stint, or whether you could do a double stint. Because like even for us, just like in the kind of lesser kind of iRacing world, the other day, like me and my teammate, we had like a 6 hour race, and the kind of benefit for us is that it was at night. So we were like, oh, okay, let's see if we can kind of do one stint on these tires. And then when we came into the pits and we saw the tire tread, we're like, wow, we're only like losing like maybe 9-10% tread or like each time we come in. So we ended up like actually quadruple stinting, David.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really cool. But like, obviously going it back to the virtual Le Mans, like it's so awesome as well, just to see how all different factors come into play, and even driving styles will influence that strategy too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I understand perfectly the quadruple stint because it happened 2000, I think it was 2021, beginning of 2021. I did with another team, a small team, 24-hour Daytona, and we were the only one that actually tested the longer stint on the same tire, and we ended up to do 4 stints on the same tire, and no one did it. So we were leading the race easily. Then we crashed, but that's another story.
That's always the case. It's always
Yeah.
the case. I know that one. I really, as soon as you mentioned that, I had PTSD as well, because that happens to us all the time as well. Like we'll be leading a race and then an LMP2 will come and dive bomb us, or like it's always something. But like we'll also, I guess, discuss in the real life side of things when we go into the next one. It happens, so it's something you always have to be kind of on your P's and Q's about, and always like adapting the strategy to figure out what is the fastest way to get to the finishing line, or in terms of like endurance racing, how do you complete the most laps, in like the time that's allotted. So that's interesting. And it's the final question just on the esports side of things as well, Davide. We mentioned the likes of full-time racing drivers such as Verstappen, Grosjean, even Marciello, which is cool as well, because like he's one of my like favorite drivers. He's too funny on social media with the stuff he posts.
And it's also difficult because I'm Italian, he's Italian, so sometimes when you speak on Discord for the William group, it's naturally becoming Italian, and you can't because no one else will understand. So you are finishing there to speak English with another Italian is very strange sometimes. But yeah, anyway.
No, but again, and that's an interesting dynamic as well that plays out. But the kind of question I was going to ask Davide is like, what's your observations, when it comes to like real life racing drivers jumping into sims and taking part in these like, competitions, and then actually, like maybe not me, because just like I think I'm too slow and too old, although I'm 27, but the real kind of like, the David Tenitzes, the Jana Upmes, like the what's his name, James Baldwin's of this world. Like, how did their approaches, how are they similar and how are they different? And like, you don't have to name names, but who do you find easier to work with, considering you also work in the real world with like obviously real racing drivers too? Is it easier to kind of communicate and train with esport drivers, or that don't really have any reference of how a car might behave in real life? Or is it easy actually with like real life racing drivers, because they know how to read data, telemetry? They can be more kind of like accurate with their their feedback. How does it differ, and how are they similar, and which one do you prefer working with more?
Yeah, I mean, sticking with sim racing issue and stuff, of course, when you try to put an engineering procedure within a team, a sim racing team, and you've got a professional racing driver that is actually working and driving in the real world, it's much easier to implement the procedure because they know how an engineer will ask you and what he wants and how to upload data or whatever, looking at what the question is better to ask to an engineer. So in that sense, I prefer to work with a pro driver because they understand better the relationship with the engineer, let's say, because they are used to it. Okay, so it's completely normal. But sometimes sim racing are much, much faster in the sim racing environment than a real driver, just because they've got more time, more experience, and whatever it takes, But when you are coming to procedure, as I said, for them it's much, much different and difficult to implement the procedure in their normal style because they are used to be a fast sim racing, do the setup by themselves, testing stuff. It doesn't matter if they understand or not. As soon as I find a setup that I like the car, okay, I can drive this, I'm faster with this, I'll go with it. Okay, so having an engineer that asking you, why did you test that? Should you test this? Did you upload the data on Google Drive or Discord or whatever, so I can check that actually it's the car, it's not you? Sometimes it's tricky because they forgot stuff. They don't understand why you are asking something. So if I have to choose, I prefer to work with a pro driver, of course, but just because of the procedure. Because then there are a lot of sim racing driver that are very good guys, very committed, and they try with everything they can to adapt to the procedure. It's just difficult for them because it is not their job at the end of the story. So I understand that, and we have much fun sometimes. Comparing stuff is always interesting, is always good, because you can do, like, you can transfer the good procedure and the way to work with an engineer of a pro driver to a sim racing one. And sometimes this works because you see the sim racing giving advice to the pro driver in terms of how you approach that corner with a virtual car that is not definitely the same sometimes to a real one, and both parts can get benefit in this way, because a sim racing driver will use a procedure that actually works and is being testing to work forever in the real world, but at the same time the pro driver that is in that moment is maybe slower than the sim racing driver can be actually as fast as the sim racing driver and be good in both worlds. So it's always good fun and very interesting to see the two parts working together.
Absolutely, Davide, and like you mentioned as well, like I'm really happy and actually excited as to see how that relationship between the two worlds they continue to grow together, because we're seeing it, with the likes of James Baldwin. He's like, he started off just as a driver on Assetto Corsa Competizione, and then got the opportunity through winning championships with them to actually race in the real life 24 hours of Spa, for actual factory McLaren team as well. And then also the GT3 guys, like, Lello and also the other guys, as part of the GT World Challenge, they also have to take part in esports races as part of this, like the Fanatec, esports thing. But the points from that also go towards the actual championship, which makes me laugh, because I'm like, if we did that in Formula One, then how would the likes of like a Fernando Alonso do compared to, like, a kid like Max, which, that is like his pride and joy. And then even talking about Max too, like when they did an interview with him and his father Just, they said, like, why is Max so relaxed? And Just was saying, well, his way of like relaxing is going in the simulator. And actually what I see him doing with his friends is that they'll be talking about setups or things to try on the car. And then he'll be talking to his engineer, Giampiero Lambiasi, and like saying that, maybe we can try this with the wing, maybe we could try this with the rake, maybe we can do this with the aero balance. So it's so intriguing actually to see how some stuff in the simulator, it's kind of almost, I guess, like rearing its head in the real world, but also like people from the real world are starting to respect sim racing more, and to give those guys their credit as well, and to actually see it as the future, of the direction as well. So I'm very excited. And just before we go on to the real world, as we discussed, like, were there any other comments or any other things too in relation to the esports side of things at the moment?
No, not really. I mean, think we cover quite a lot.
Mhm.
I love to see more the implementation between real world and virtual world, and I think COVID lockdowns and stuff helped in this sense. Maybe it's the only positive thing they did, but I would love to see more and more than this, because working in this way is very good. I think, is in both industry can really have an advantage in the long term.
Absolutely, and to kind of bring it on to the next one then, and also a very mysterious man, Mr. F1blag has made it here too. So thankfully, I also have him to ask Davide some questions, and to be part of this show, because it's like getting the band together. But before I ask Davide the next question, Black, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm returning to the real world after a double tonsillitis. But enough about me.
Oh, no.
Hopefully, my silky smooth vocals are still apparent. But fantastic! What an honor to be on with Davide. Great to be here.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Excellent.
Then.
Excellent. Well, Davide, let's go to we were talking a lot about the real world then. So one thing that made me smile, and I've been keeping an eye on as well on your Instagram and the work you've been doing, is just, obviously the European Le Mans as well, the World Endurance Championship too. You guys have done really, really, really well, and I'm so happy that, for TF Sport, they've won the GTE AM championships. That's the amateur class, but still within GTE racing. Man, that's super cool. And I mean, now that we're at the end of the season, you gave us a bit of an insight and like a teaser about winning that championship, which is a huge, huge like honor and something really commendable to look forward to and to celebrate. But then also, some low points have happened, like you're about to win a race with the team with the European Le Mans, and then 10 minutes before the end of an endurance race, you get taken out or hit by another like opposing car. Like what's the season been like, for you, and kind of what are you looking forward to in terms of like, the team and also the future of like GTE? Because there's a lot of stuff happening in like endurance racing. We've now got like this whole LMDH, LMH kind of like category as well for the hypercars and the prototypes. From what I understand, the GTEs are also going to be kind of like rebranded, or almost a lot of changes are going to come in that regard too. So yeah, just like I'm gonna hand you the floor, man. Like, what were your highs and lows of the season, and what is the future of like that particular class too in relation to the GTEs?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the season, for me, I feel a much better engineer now than 12 months ago, to be honest. So first I learned a lot because I had the possibility, of course, before this year to work with GT car, but was mainly GT4, was mainly European, but more national level, let's say. So of course how to work as a race engineer, but the opportunity to be at that level for a full year, it's been just teaching me stuff, to be honest. So I feel much more experienced now, and I can apply this experience to more teams or more championship, maybe even some championship like I never did, like GT World Challenge, let's say. And that's good for me, good for my career, because first of all, I'm a passionate guy about motorsports. If I can learn something more in motorsports, it doesn't matter what it is, I'm always happy about that. And winning the championship, well, it's one of the two more competitive class in WEC at the moment, GTIM. So what I can say, it was expected, but you never realize until you do it. We did a very good season, a lot of high, a lot of low, because if you remember, we spoke about that. We won Le Mans, and that was unexpected. So if I have to compare the Le Mans stuff with the World Championship, I can say Le Mans represent much more for me, because the WEC, it's good to win. It was a great honor, as you said, and I'm very happy about that. But at the end, it was a success built race by race. So when you go at the last race with 20 points advantage on P2, you just need to focus and don't do stupid stuff, and the championship will be done. So it was more expecting than everything else. Nothing is easy, of course, because in 8-hour race in Bahrain, it could happen everything. If you retire the car, then you don't win at the same time. So it was good to win, but never, ever like winning Le Mans this year. And doing WEC and Le Mans in the same year, I think is just a dream in that sense. Never expect to do that. If you speak with me like in 2021, I would like say, if you said to me like you win Le Mans and WEC in the same year, I said, come on, stop joking. It's not even possible for me. So being in this position now, it's just feeling good. And for what concerns the GTE class, I'm sure you are aware about the GTE Pro finishing with this year. So next year it won't be GTE Pro and GTE AM. It will be just GTE class, and will be exactly the same car of this year. So for 1 year we still have GTE, but then from 2024 there will be just not existing anymore, because it's not just a rebranding. It will be a GT3 car going replace to GTE. And I think the main reason is it's simple. It's much, much cheaper than a GTE car, not just to run, but also to buy for teams. And if you see how many cars are in the grid of GT World Challenge, It's just a crazy number. So I think WEC, ELMS want to go there, want to have a very good amount of GT3 car, and will be always with a bronze driver and 2 pros, or a bronze, silver, and a pro anyway in the car. So it's still be in a good competitive class with a lot of constructor, a lot of possibilities, because on the bronze driver bring money to the teams. So teams have a budget to do stuff that is different to what a GTE Pro with 3 pro drivers they've got, or 2 pro drivers depending on the length of the race, have got so far. Because for a pro car, you need a budget to do everything, for employees, for the car, for the development, for running the car, and for the drivers. Like this, they've got the budget coming from the bronze driver, and then you can pay maybe a gold driver, or you can use a factory driver, pay all the employees, but you've got an initial budget, so it's much cheaper to run all the program, and that's the reason why the GT3 are so widely spread into European level at the moment. I think WEC want to do the same stuff, but worldwide, and it would be good, I think, because it's just simpler, cheaper, and you can run a lot of cars at the same time. You can have new constructors like Lamborghini or Mercedes that actually don't have a GTE car. So you will have multiple constructors, not just 3. And a lot of team, I think, will be interesting to move from GT World Challenge to ELMS or WEC in 2024. So we will see a very long list of entries, I think, and that's good for motorsport overall. For what concerns the hypercar, I think it's a bit of a mess, because for my opinion, FIA should have done like a well decision about those cars are hybrid or not. Because of course, if they are hybrid, they will have an advantage in consumption, performance, and everything. And doing the BOP against a car that is not hybrid then will be tricky. And sometimes they are not the best to do BOPs, if I have to be honest. So they just find another way to make things complicated, and that's not good for the sport. I think it's good they attract constructor like Ferrari that is coming back. Lamborghini will come in 2024. Cadillac will come. So it's for sure a better top class. But I think in the long term, they need to decide if they want to have those car hybrid or not, first of all. And then you can do a regulation that actually helps all the constructor to build a top class that is much more similar like Formula One in terms of sporting and show and money, and everybody knows Formula One. I'm not sure everybody knows WEC in the world, even if it's the same organizer, it's the FIA, and it's the same level, it's just endurance racing. So I think there are some stuff they can change in the hypercar stuff, but we will see. There is time. Next year will be the real first year for hypercar, because so far they've got 6 cars. It's not a real championship with 6 cars. You know what I mean. We'll see what's going on between 2023 and 2024 in that sense.
I agree, Davide, and lots of good talking points there too. And I'll bring Blag into it as well for some of his views, and also for him to throw some questions in there too. But yeah, just like I think in a way, I'm almost sad to see the GTs go. Obviously, it won't be next year. Thankfully, like you said, we've got those for one more year, although there's not going to be like a division between AM and Pro. It'll just be one class. But in a way, I feel kind of sad, because I also race a lot of the GTE cars in my simulators. And this year, like me and my teammate, we did like 24 hours together in the Porsche 911 RSR. And those cars are so cool because they have so much power. They don't have ABS. So there's definitely a lot more skill involved in driving a GTE car. Some would say that, there's something like a touring car on drugs, like the speed that they can do and the amount of downforce they have, for a car that technically is based very loosely on a road car or kind of like a road sports car is crazy. But then also as well, I think you mentioned a lot of benefits to come with them, well, when I say them, European Le Mans and World Endurance Championship, kind of revising their rules and trying to get, like rather than having GTE, which is more expensive to run, more niche, them kind of introducing the GT3 cars. Because as you mentioned there too, there's so many GT3 teams and constructors. You've got Mercedes, you've got Audi, which released their I think R8 Evo 2, and the likes of Valentino Rossi was driving that this year too, in the team WRT. But then also next year, there's a completely new Ferrari, the 488 GT3 Evo that's going to be retired, and there'll be a new 296. The BMW M4 has been, making appearances in the GT World Endurance, but not in the sprint. So to see that in more series as well will be fun. Porsche have a completely facelifted 911, I think 9.2 coming. Lamborghini also have an Evo coming, and also Ford. I think they're more towards IMSA, but they've also got a Mustang with I think a homologated engine that might be compatible for GT3 in the future as well. And the final point you mentioned there as well, Davide, about essentially drivers like Raffaello Marcello. He's a Mercedes factory driver, but wouldn't get an opportunity in Formula One, probably given his age and just kind of where he is in his career. He might actually get the opportunity to take part in something like a Le Mans, because for a long time now, Mercedes haven't raced in World Endurance Championship. They do Formula One, and over the years they've been pulling out of lots of things. Like they pulled out of Formula E this year. They pulled out of the DTM. They used to do a lot of prototype racing with the Sauber Mercedes C9 and obviously the CLK GTR. I know the older audience is going to be I remember those sleek looking cars as prototypes. But it would be amazing, to have a GT3 class, because as you mentioned, it will appeal to so many manufacturers, so many works teams and drivers like Lello and other. I just don't want this also to become a Lello podcast too, but also other factory GT3 drivers that work really hard and compete in a lot of really cool and challenging series, like even the Nürburgring 24 hours, will also get the opportunity to take part in a very honorable race like Le Mans. And you talked as well earlier about how significant that is and how exciting that is. And actually, I'm going to bring Blag into this next part, Blag, because, we as Formula One fans, we kind of get onto the FIA, in terms of how they've struggled to get manufacturers into Formula One for a long time. Obviously, Honda pulled out and then have kind of tipped their toe back in with Red Bull, but that's not really a full engine partnership as what it used to be. Then obviously Porsche was supposed to come in, but then that hasn't quite worked. The Audi kind of deal was also quite slow, and again, you probably wouldn't give Stefano Domenicali much credit for that either, because he was the CEO of Audi, ironically, when Ferrari sacked him, which kind of goes back to me and Davide's earlier points about Ferrari. What's your kind of take on the points that Davide made about even the FIA could do better in other series other than F1, when it comes to hypercars and kind of them still not really getting the BOP for hybrid cars and naturally aspirated cars or turbocharged cars in a class, correct?
It's an absolutely fascinating question, and in fact, we're linking back up like Mbappe and Neymar, albeit not at the World Cup.
The chemistry.
Hopefully, there's no own goals in the World Cup. But look, and hopefully France don't advance any further than the quarterfinals past England. But
it's coming home.
It's coming home. It's coming home. Right, exactly. So
again,
yeah, exactly.
Well, not in the Euros. We know how that ended with Italy, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't speak this time, so.
How dare you? Yeah. Well, there we go. One of my closest colleagues was an Italian at the Euros, and that was a difficult Monday, to say the least. Yeah, it's a really good question, and I was thinking about asking you about this, Davide, as well. From my perspective, when I'm not an engineer, but I'm a sort of student of the game. As a child, I was given a book which had 100 years of Grand Prix racing. So it wasn't Formula One; it was Grand Prix racing, and it went back all the way to the turn of the century. I won't reveal how old I am to work out when 100 years ago was when I was a child. But you could see that essentially there was a combination of sort of extremely rich people that wanted to have fun and then manufacturers that wanted to prove that their mark was the strongest. And in a strange way, 100 and X years later, I don't think a lot has changed. So in my opinion, when you look at things like Formula One or other sports, it's about, obviously, you clearly want to attract those wealthy investors, those privateers. But in today's day and age, they're fewer and far between, particularly when you look at Formula One as a premier motorsport and the cost of participating. Really, you want to have a platform, and this is my view. I'd be interested to hear what you think, Davide. The Formula One needs to provide a platform for manufacturers to show that their engineering and that their technology is superior, and therefore Formula needs to be relevant to, in my view, what they put on the road. So yeah, I mean, turning it to you, that's my view. Maybe not just limited to F1, but all the Formula. Like how does a Formula, how does a motorsport series capture the manufacturers in your view?
Yeah, I mean, it's business, so a manufacturer wants to sell cars. As you said, some times ago, Formula One was actually the research and development of solutions that actually we had now in automotive sector, in our car parked in the garage, like, I don't know, the seamless gearbox. That was Formula One stuff. Now we all have a double clutch gearbox in our cars. So that's the main stuff that attract manufacturers. And for this reason, if you think about it, we've got Formula E. I think Formula One and Formula E can't exist together for so much longer, because with all the automotive stuff going electric, of course a manufacturer want to have research in electric vehicles, and Formula E is offering that. Formula One, not at all at the moment, because okay, they are hybrid, they have electric components in the engine, but it's not the same. So I think what we will see in the long term, in terms of attracting manufacturer and actually have one single seater top class, it will be one Formula One that will be an hybrid between the actual Formula One we've got so far now and the Formula E that in the last few years is attracting a lot of manufacturing, becoming bigger and bigger. They can't coexist for much longer, I think. And that's the same actually happen with WEC. If you think about it, manufacturer comes because they offer a solution in the technical regulation that can actually easier build than the older LMP1, and it can't be a testing bench for long and extreme race cars and let them build a supercar that actually derive from the hypercar, and at the same time have a reliability on the long term and very powerful car that actually can't be so bad to sell. You know what I mean? And same for the GT3 story we just discussed. They went GT3 because you attract manufacturer. Lamborghini, as I said, Mercedes, they didn't have a GTE car. Audi as well, they didn't have a GTE car. So opening a GT3 class just make them interested, because you can build on a car that actually you sell as a supercar, a GT3 car that is basically the same, just more extreme and more racing oriented. That's easier, cheaper, and actually gets an advantage for a manufacturer. That's what I think is what a manufacturer is interested in, because they need to invest money to do Formula One, and they need to invest money to do Formula E. So if you have to choose in 2030, you will have just electric cars, for example. What do you want to invest now? Money on something that give you 7 years time to prepare and do research for cars you will need to sell, or for something hybrid like Formula One that more or less in 7 years won't be there anymore? That's easy answer, I think.
Well, easy answer for some. I mean,
for some, yeah.
I mean, what a great answer. I was thinking about you saying Formula E and Formula One cannot coexist for too much longer. We had a guest earlier in this season, Ed Foster, who is basically the compere or the lead presenter for Goodwood Festival of Speed. And he said, actually, of course, electric vehicles will play a part in the future, but they aren't the only sustainable vehicle that we'll see, or at least there are questions about electric vehicles relating to the production and disposal of the power unit, the battery. So I don't know. Do you have a view on that? Is it like this is my thing, right? I'm basically a child at heart. I still love Formula One, irrespective of how it's treated me or the fact that it might be boxing itself into a corner. But is there a future for Formula One or other motorsport series that don't embrace electric, but perhaps look at sustainable fuels?
Could be. I mean, the electric cars discussion is very difficult to do because I think the main issue for electric cars, and it's the reason why they are not widely spread, even if it's different years now, they are producing cars and selling electric cars, you still buy a gasoline car if you can. Why this? Because batteries, they are not reliable, they are not on long range like a normal car. So I think if no one find a solution about having lithium outside the batteries, so creating battery based on something else that actually is more reliable, is more safe, is not dangerous, and actually can ensure longer distance on the same car like a normal car is doing, I don't think electric will be the only solution for the future. I think we will have it, but that could be much more research on biofuel or something that actually helps pollution more than electric cars. Because if you think about it, the lithium batteries are like that since forever. I don't even remember when they actually were invented it, and we still use the same technology, improved, but same technology. So I'm not sure we can replace the lithium in the battery very soon, and that's the issue of electricity. So the power unit is difficult to dispose of because you are not helping the pollution when you dispose a battery. Maybe you save the environment for 10 years of no CO2 into the environment, but then you're going to discharge and put away disposal a battery, and you are creating pollution anyway because it's radioactive. So there are issues in that. And could be a solution using other sources like biofuel, hydrogen, with the all problems we've got, because hydrogen, you have problem to stock them, is very dangerous, more than petrol. So you need to adapt everything, and that's expensive at the same time. The thing is, it depends. It depends what happened with the research. It depends what happened with the scientific field, what they discover. For racing will be just the natural consequence. I hope we will have engines, real engines, with all the noise and all the pollution stuff. Not because I'm against environment, but because that's racing. I can't see too much an electric car racing without any noise or any actual excitement about having fire up a car. That's difficult for me because I'm older. Probably I'm getting old. But yeah, that's what I mean. For motorsport, I hope there will be a future for engine with petrol and stuff, but that will be based a lot on discoveries and biofuel and stuff like that to make it right.
Well, let me take this moment to assure our listeners that we are not funded by the anti-electric vehicle lobby, because if we were, then all of our audio equipment would be insanely good. No,
yeah,
I think they're all valid points. So before I hand back to Denz, a bit more of a fantasy question for you. Let's say you're a manufacturer, and maybe it's difficult for you to answer this because I'm not going to tell you which, right? Just imagine you're a manufacturer. You can pick one motorsport series to invest in, to enter into. From your perspective, which one gives you the best return on investment from a kind of marketing and also an R&D perspective, looking at today's, or at least the evolution of motorsport series that you're currently aware of?
Yeah, I mean, if I have to choose overall classes, I will put money in Formula E at the moment because it's going good. It's actually that technology we will have, and at the same time, in terms of marketing, you are going well. People are interested in that. A lot of people start to follow more the Formula E the last few years. Gen 3 looks good. It looks more a single seater than before for me. So I think if I have to choose just one class, I will do Formula E as investment.
Fantastic. And now we've redressed the balance of electric vehicle support versus opposition. So Two things on Formula E, and then I'll hand back to my good friend AMG Denz. I was watching towards the end of last season. I think they showed the recap of all of the season finales from the beginning, and I'd forgotten that they used to sometimes stop halfway through a race and swap cars.
Yes,
so that shows you
Gen 1.
Yeah, so that shows you the development, right? Now there's no problem, and in fact they're having to create algorithms to limit the amount of charge so that it's competitive if they do safety car laps or something. So it's absolutely fascinating. And the second point, which is more of a parochial one, for me, I think in the UK, if you look at Formula E, part of the reason why it's like getting widespread attention is because it's on free-to-air television. So it's been on Channel 4, it's been on YouTube. And so it can be accessed by, ordinarily wouldn't pay for motorsport. And I think that's why if you look at the history of different sports, where they peak or just before the peak, it's before they've been put behind the paywall. So a plea to the organisers of Formula E, please keep your content sort of free to air. And I suspect you'll get more buzz, more engagement, and attract more potential manufacturers into the sport. So I'll hand back to Denz now, but what a fascinating set of questions and answers. And back to you, Denz.
Hey, thank you for that, Black Man. And again, really interesting because, we kind of touched just in the world of Le Mans and obviously World Endurance kind of series and how the change and the chase for sustainability has affected them. But then also I think that we neglect Formula E quite a lot. And actually, like Davide pointed out too, if you're talking about one sport that's going to be the most relevant for the future, it has to be Formula E in that regard. And, they've done really well. I can't even, kind of slander them too much, even with myself being a huge petrol head. So it's interesting to see, but also how it will be perceived by the petrol heads like us in the future is also something I'm intrigued to see how it will play out in the future. But bringing it back to Davide, because he's our star and obviously he's done so much this year. Davide, you've got a nice winter to look forward to. You and the missus, you can do some exploring. You've also got some amazing memories to reminisce on as well in terms of being World Endurance Championship, winner in that regard, and also in terms of the highs of a Le Mans championship too, and also as well as that, just even the virtual world we've discussed kind of how much that's growing and kind of everything that's going forward towards the virtual Le Mans in January. But one thing we haven't talked about, and I like talking about and following too, is A Cup of Racing, which is your company that you started, and it's great because even just with what you've did with that, it shows just ambition. It shows just you basically not only just giving your expertise, for a team, this is an employee, but also in your own kind of way, making your own kind of business and being able to offer motorsport technical support as well, in both the real world and the sim racing world. So my question to you, Davide, was are there any projects or anything in relation to that side of the world that you're really looking forward to working on, and kind of what are your plans for the winter break as well?
Okay, I can't tell too much about that because a lot of stuff are to be confirmed, so I'm not allowed to speak about it.
Oh, okay.
But I can say not really great projects. I'm still with Williams for the 2023, full 2023, so we'll probably do other endurance racing with them. Could be 24-hour Daytona, but again, we need to discuss that now. The full focus is on Le Mans Virtual Series, so I'm sure about the 24-hour Le Mans in that sense in January. For real world, I can't say anything at the moment. I'm working on something good, big, but we'll see. Maybe before the 20th of December, I can have an answer and say something more, but it will be on social media anyway. So just follow social media and it will be everything there. But A Cup of Racing is growing and I'm very happy about the success we've got so far, especially for 2022. It was our year, both sim racing and real world for obvious reasons. But you never stop, If you get a point, you can do better. So I'm still working on improve myself, improve the company, and find good places to go racing, both virtual and real world. And yeah, I'll be a bit mysterious basically. So sorry about that.
No, I mean that's okay, Davide. And again, just like that to me is still positive because it means that the things on the horizon, things are going up and not down, which is what we like. And also on top of that as well, that the kind of landscape and the world around, like what you do is evolving, which is always exciting. And kind of one other thing we mentioned as well that I didn't get your kind of take on was, like would you ever consider maybe GT World Challenge and what would you see as the technical like challenges like engineer wise of like the strategy for the sprint races that they do in comparison to the world endurance and the Le Mans series, for example?
I mean, I'd like to do it. I have to be honest. It's one of the championship I always like to do it and never had the chance. But
Mm.
in terms of regulation, I'm not even so much sure. So because I need to read it actually. But I think it's another SRO championship, so it won't be too much different from GT4 Europe or British GT, for example. It's the same company that organize everything. So I know there is the race logic and the minimum pit stop time. The thing is good with GT World Challenge, and I like to test it myself. It's the level of competitiveness, because at the end of the story, you've got 40 cars in the grid, and everybody could win. So that's why I'm interested in doing that. But we'll see. Maybe 2023 will be GT3 World Challenge. Who knows? I know, but who knows?
Teasing us there, Davide. I see how it is. I see how it is, man. No, that's interesting. And again, like for a follower like me that's like trying to use this platform to diversify, what's available, because I think a lot of fans just think motor racing is F1. And yes, it's cool. And yes, you get all the big names and stuff like that. I've always been someone kind of in the shadows. I've always like liked kind of like the GT racing, and I've always liked the prototypes. And even this year, I've been pushing myself even a bit more out of my comfort zone to try and even understand NASCAR and how even just like in the southern parts of America, how that works. And even in terms of like, I think Blag was mentioning it too, like even in the world of like rally racing, now you've got these cars which are like partly hybrid as well. And how does that affect a car that's like four-wheel drive and stuff like this too? So it's such an exciting time. And I think with an individual like yourself, Davide, you're an exemplary example, of someone who's like kept your head down, you've worked extremely hard for the things that you've earned in life. Also, like, I can tell that you want to continue learning. You don't want to become stagnant or complacent. The aim is always to just continue leveling up and to continue to add value to the teams and businesses that you work for.
Thank you for this. I mean, that's the only way for me. You need to deserve stuff. Never have a very gift in my life, so I work. And if you get a point, you can say for sure that's your working and deserve what you did without any big help or stuff. That's always good to feel at the end of a season or at the end of a year. I think in every job, it's not just mine. So yeah, thank you for that.
No worries at all, man. No worries at all. We're always going to be, following you up and also keeping an eye on your progress too. And we look forward to those announcements that you make on social media as well, in due course. And as always, Georgina will do a great job of promoting that when this episode comes out fairly soon. Blag, I know you're still here as well. Are there any other questions that you had in mind before I do the wrap up?
No, I just wanted to sort of add to the feel good vibe. I feel like on this show we meet people that do extraordinary things. They have some things that are in common, other things very, very diverse. But that kind of work ethic, focus, determination is always there. So whether you like it or not, Davide, we have officially adopted you as our race engineer for the show, and we'll be following your exploits. And we look forward. You said the 20th of December, so we'll be keeping our eyes peeled on your Twitter and other social media on that date.
Yeah, thank you for that, and very glad to be adopted, actually. So, I mean, it's always fun to do this, so happy to do it.
No, we're happy to have you as well, Davide. And honestly, like it's a pleasure too. And like I said, even just like on a personal level too, when we're, exchanging DMs and stuff like that as well, man, I'm really fascinated because there's just so much going on and like it's so cool. And I'm like, wow, like this is awesome. This is like, like it's almost like I'm living my own dreams through your lens. So I'm really hoping that you continue to share this amazing content as well, and that people give you the appreciation that you deserve and the opportunities that you're worth as well, man. So yeah, Davide, thank you so much for joining us again. We've got to get you back on hopefully in the new year, hopefully as racing picks up, and after perhaps the virtual Le Mans as well. We're going to be crossing our fingers for you, and praying to our lucky stars that you have a very successful virtual Le Mans, so you can make it 2 for 2. Imagine that, man, 2 Le Mans in 1 year, basically. That's like some goat stuff, man. That's like legendary.
That would be even bigger, I think. But let's see. And then you can always say it's not the same year because January is 2023. So let's say like this.
Still, we count it, man. We count it. Oh, but yeah, man, like, thank you so much, Davide.
Thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and nice to meet you. F1blag was good. It was good to speak to you too.
My pleasure. Awesome.
Excellent stuff, guys. Well, listen, it's been AMG Denz and the dynamic, fantastic F1blag as always. We'll have more content coming up in our Christmas build out. There's so many things to look forward to. In fact, I'm going to get the calendar out just before we close this one out. But lots of things for you guys to be looking forward to. We've had an episode drop with Mary Yasmin, so make sure you check that out as well. Obviously, on top of that, F2, we've got a, I think it's an F4 driver coming on soon as well. So that's going to be exciting, but I'm not going to name any names. I'm actually going to be in Davide's position on Friday because we're going to have another founder of the show interview me about my sim racing experiences, but from a more kind of like consumer perspective and not so much on like the very aggressive and competitive side that Davide deals. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And
I will follow that.
Oh, gosh. Well, I've learned a lot of things from you, Davide. So I'm just gonna be, basically, crediting you for all the points I'm making that way. Yeah,
that's another reason to follow.
So that's gonna be super fun as well. Really looking forward to that. And then Black Man, like we've got a Christmas kind of wrap up of the season and just kind of our favorite episodes and moments as well that have happened. So that is going to be awesome and so much to look forward to as well. So Blag, I'll leave you with a final note for our listeners and viewers out there.
Yeah, so the final note is as follows. Georgie has done some research and seen our ranking globally as a sports news podcast. Believe it or not, we're in the sports news category. And do you know what? Apple said we have good performance, but you can improve that performance by going to your podcast vehicle of choice and following us, giving us a like, and leaving us a review on whichever platform you choose. But tonight it's been Davide. Thank you for being with us. The unbelievable modern day Morgan Freeman AMG Denz and the recovering F1blag. That's been Stripping the Dipping. We'll see you next time. Good night.